Hi, I'm Stephanie Flax Oppenheim, Federal News Network's Content Development Manager, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our Fed Future, the Workforce Evolution webinar, brought to you in partnership with WEPA. Before we begin, we'd like you to answer a few polling questions so our speakers can fine-tune their remarks. Please indicate your choices on the following questions, and we'll get started shortly. Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections, since we are recording it for a radio broadcast on Federal News Network. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Federal News Network reporter Drew Friedman.
Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. My guests today are Carmen Garcia, the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Office of Personnel Management, and Tracy Thierrett, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Welcome to you both, and thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much, Drew. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Drew.
So we know that earlier this year, the Office of Personnel Management, on a more government-wide level, set this broader vision for the future of the federal workforce and what that would entail. And they talked about this goal of a workforce that's diverse, agile, and engaged with the right skills to enable mission delivery. So I wanted to ask, within your agency, and Tracy, maybe we can start with you, how do you see those pillars like diversity and agility aligning with the work that you're doing on an agency-specific level?
So, Drew, I know with the implementation of the PACT Act, which was passed last August and has really had VA in a surge hiring and retention mode, that we've really been doing a lot of outreach, especially through the President's management agenda and the focus on early career talent and internships and bringing and reaching a lot of diversity. We have seen by partnering with OPM and the use of USA Jobs and the remote jobs portal that we are seeing more diversity in our applicant pools by advertising positions as remote. When you look at all of the types of positions that we post, both those that are done on site, those that are telework eligible, as well as those that are remote, we see the most women, the most veterans, the most minorities, the most individuals with disabilities applying for those remote positions. So as we execute more of a hybrid work environment, we are looking for increasing our diversity. We actually publish on a monthly basis a workforce dashboard on our external facing website. And we have seen just in this fiscal year that our hires are reflecting more diversity than our actual onboards within the department. So great to see those results from leveraging all these tools and that technology. In terms of agile, what I would say is through the pandemic and being more of a hybrid work environment with that combination of on-site telework and remote work presence, that we are really looking at how we can maintain continuity of operations, how we can expand those opportunities for people to learn new skills and to be part of projects and initiatives that may need a little extra effort. So I think we have seen both now and in the past, and will continue to see in the future, how this hybrid work environment that we are becoming more comfortable and familiar with is helping us both with diversity and being agile in responding to, you know, those things that we don't expect and or those things that are kind of time limited that we really need to surge and prepare for.
So Tracy, you mentioned that you do have a lot of remote job openings, and hybrid work has become, of course, much more common, both at the VA and government-wide. Can you tell me, like, specifically, what are some of the roles that you see that are, you know, that can be remote at the VA or that can be hybrid? And, you know, how are those kind of working on the recruitment end for you all?
Yep. Great question, Drew. And I would say we're focusing a lot on our mission critical occupations in our Veterans Benefits Administration, where we are, you know, processing more claims now than at any time in the history of the VA. We have what are called contact center positions. So those are like call center operators who are receiving questions, answering questions, routing individuals who need information to the right place. Those are remote jobs. And we are really seeing a lot of success in being able to bring people in. Interestingly enough, they are also a stepping stone to a higher graded position. So we're seeing a lot of turnover in those occupations. So constantly looking to keep them filled and looking for those remote opportunities. We also have a lot of remote opportunities in human resources, and that is one of our mission critical occupations where we have surged to meet the needs of recruitment and hiring and retention across the department. Our contract specialists are often in remote positions. Our IT specialists, those who don't have to be on site to perform their duties, or remote positions that we're recruiting for. So those are just a couple of our occupations that we're out there looking to fill remotely. We also have several initiatives to bring on military spouses, and those are also perfect opportunities to attract military spouses who travel a lot, who move a lot throughout their military service members' careers. So those are some of the ways in which we're posting our positions to the USA Jobs portal, highlighting certain job series where we have more opportunities to be remote, and then targeting those to specific audiences to increase the diversity within the VA workforce.
Herman, I want to turn to you now. And, you're in a really interesting position where OPM does have this kind of broader role for the government-wide workforce, but you're focused on the internal employees at OPM and human capital management for those workers. So can you tell me a little bit about, this broader messaging that we've seen come out of OPM? How does that then filter back into OPM's own workforce and some of the things that you guys are working on right now?
All right, yes. So, Drew, I'm actually in a unique position where I am both the agency's acting chief diversity officer in addition to the chief human capital officer. So that is a wonderful opportunity because I take very seriously our DEIA strategy, right? So we have several stakeholders within our agency to support our DEI efforts, and together they form our internal DEI council. Now, this council is comprised of the highest level of agency leadership. It also has our employee resource groups and our union partners. And this council plays a critical role in ensuring that we are on track with our DEI strategic plan and all of the wonderful work that is taking place there. And that includes how we recruit, how we retain, how we sustain, and how we leverage data and technology. And by having the right folks at the table, we are ensuring that DEIA is embedded in the fabric of everything that we do. Now, similar to some of the things that Tracy talked about, recruiting in a new competitive labor landscape requires the use of workplace flexibilities to really bolster our hiring practices and strengthen our ability to recruit qualified individuals that are drawn from all the segments of society. And this is why we have really taken steps to focus on our strategic recruitment at OPM. And it's interesting, right? Because OPM is commonly sometimes referred as like HR for the federal government. So for us, so many of our employees, our supervisors, our managers know HR very well. And by leaning in on our recruitment strategy, strategic recruitment, leaning in on hiring flexibilities like veterans, military spouses, individuals with disabilities, we've also been able to update pathways into the federal government and be competitive with the private sector. So for us, it's very important to strive to find new ways to create supportive and accessible environments where all employees are welcome and can continue to contribute to OPM's mission. And to do this, we promote equitable use of these flexibilities that I just mentioned within and across our teams. We provide training and support to employees and managers so that we can create inclusive teams in a hybrid environment and provide our employees with the support that they need.
And I want to dive a little bit more into this idea of the hybrid work environment. Of course, this is something that, has become very much fundamental to the federal government in the last few years. And it doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon, although there have been a couple changes recently to what exactly that's going to look like. But what are some strategies, and Carmen, we can start with you. What are some strategies that you use within OPM to kind of manage employees, whether that's engagement or satisfaction, things of that nature, when you're working with teams that aren't physically located in the same space?
Yeah, there definitely have been some challenges, right? As we have been navigating this hybrid work environment, starting with the beginning. At the very beginning of the pandemic was, federal government needed to quickly identify some of these technology gaps in order to be able the continuity of operations that Tracy earlier mentioned. We needed to learn how these new communication tools to enable video conferencing meetings and virtual collaboration. We needed to make sure that like every employee had a laptop and the resources that they needed, right? And we continue to be mindful of inclusion in this hybrid work environment. We now have some employees that show up to work physically in the office and some who show up on video. And we need to ensure that everybody's voice is heard and everyone can contribute. Now, managers need to be intentional about engaging with employees to break down those silos and be thoughtful about projects and the teams working in collaboration. Now, another challenge that we are seeing is the onboarding and the orientation process, especially for early career employees who have not previously been in the workforce. These employees may be familiar with technology, but they are unfamiliar with workplace culture. And we recommend that our managers take a special effort and take time to connect them with OPM's mission and help them understand, those workplace norms in a variety of ways, whether they be in person or virtually. And the goal is to ensure that our new hires and our early career talent have the necessary experiential learning that will set them up for success at work. And this is for all of our employees. When they are physically in the office, managers need to strive to make in-person time meaningful. And one way to do this is at OPM that we're doing is by designating one or more core days so that we make sure that when people are in the office, their teams are in the office and they have those meaningful in-person interaction. OPM is leading, has a leading role in government promoting positive employee experience. And one way we do this is by collecting employee data and feedback in order to help agencies better support their workforce. And this is done through the administration of OPM's annual Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, otherwise known as FEVS. And at OPM, within our strategic plan, we have an objective that focuses on promoting a positive organization where leadership drives an enterprise mindset, lives the OPM values, and supports employee engagement and professional growth. So to this end, at OPM, we developed an enterprise-wide employee engagement plan to enable a more coordinated and comprehensive effort to support employees and guide program areas and offices in the development of their own targeted plans. And this particular plan focuses on 4 themes where our agency wants to make improvements and gains. This includes career development, performance recognition, workload management, and the decision-making, involvement, and communications process. So we've identified these themes not only on FEVS data, but also on the feedback that we receive from our employees. And additionally, we are in the process of linking these employment engagement activities to goals in our agency DEI strategic plan. So always making that linkage and to provide flexibility to our agency leaders to develop solutions that work for their team. So that's just a little bit of how we've been navigating some of the challenges and opportunities, right, when it comes to this hybrid and work environment at OPM.
Right. Thank you, Carmen. And yeah, I think that point, especially about the using feedback and using data, that's something that, I hear a lot from agencies is, you want to listen to your employees, get that feedback, and then make the changes or make adjustments based on that. So Tracy, I want to turn it to you as well here. Do you see like the VA using similar strategies for hybrid employees? I mean, I know that your agency, of course, has a lot of people who are required to be on site, but when it comes to this balance, at least for the employees who can telework, how do you manage engagement or satisfaction? And is that something that you're measuring as well?
Absolutely, echoing a lot of what Carmen had said. But I mean, in essence, hybrid work is not new or unique. We've had distributed teams. We've had a combination of on-site, remote, and telework presence in the federal government for many, many years. I think what has changed is not the concept, but the approach to implementing the concept because of what we saw during the pandemic and the drastic shift to maximum telework in many locations. So as we are coming out of the pandemic, we're still at our core looking at, is a position suitable? is an employee eligible? But what we're seeing is when given the preference or given the option of teleworking or being remote, employees are speaking up and saying what their interests are and going to other competitors if we aren't offering those same workplace flexibilities. So I think the concept is fairly structured, and we're looking at how we can be more competitive in implementing it to help with recruitment and retention. Employee feedback is essential. Carmen mentioned FEVS at the Department of Veterans Affairs. We have the all-employee survey. We just had our employee survey completed. We're doing the analysis. 75% of our workforce completed it. That is an incredible response rate for a survey that reaches over 400,000 employees. And interestingly enough, where we saw the most disengaged employees is for those employees who can telework, but their supervisor doesn't allow it. So we are really seeing the connection between engagement and telework, and in that category specifically. The other things that I think we have learned as we are becoming more proficient in the use of hybrid work environments in the federal government is that the data and the tracking of the information and the analysis of the information is critical. Through OMB's memo M2315, we have to establish organizational health and organizational performance metrics, in addition to reporting out each pay period in terms of what onboard in the headquarters in the National Capital Region, total onboard rates, a lot of data and statistics. But it's really helpful to use that information to get a sense of what's working. So you have your all-employee survey questions. You have the OMB data that we have to report. And then we also look at things like in USA Staffing, where somebody declines a job offer. Why did they decline that job offer? Is it because they couldn't be remote? Is it because they couldn't telework? We also do exit surveys and stay interviews and capture information on why people are leaving or why people may be transferring to another agency. Carmen and I just received some data the other week. About 40% of all of the moves of HR professionals within the federal government are transfers. Are people leaving one agency hoppings, as they say, because one has more flexibility than another? So I think that's my, kind of long-winded response to how we're using hybrid. We have been using it, just kind of maybe using it more strategically now for recruitment and retention. The tools that we have in place to get that feedback so that we can analyze and assess what employees are saying, and then continuing to apply that to our decision making so that we're able to be that employer of choice and make sure that our staffing levels are such that we're able to deliver on those promises that we've made to veterans and their families.
And Tracy, just one quick follow-up there. I know earlier on you mentioned that you have a goal of increasing early career recruitment as well. Is that something where you see maybe a particular or heightened interest in hybrid work or the option of telework when you're looking at that specific subset of the workforce?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, Carmen touched on training. OPM has an incredible thriving in a hybrid workforce training for management that helps you to understand how to communicate with all generations, not just early career talent, how to manage, how to make sure there's trusting relationships, how to make sure there are those experiences that sometimes you only get when you're in person with someone. So what I'm seeing with the early career talent is they want more flexibility. They want more autonomy, and that they will question some of the things we've always done and why we do them. So I think making sure that we are able to meet them where they are, to be able to offer those types of flexibilities, because that work-life balance matters. If I don't have to commute an hour from work to go home and do something in the evening with my family, that's going to be a factor in whether I take this job at the Department of Veterans Affairs or this job at the Office of Personnel Management. So for those early career talent, and I had a wonderful briefing yesterday from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on their outlook for employment. And, with one candidate being able to look at 5 different job opportunities, you really have to make sure that what you're offering is better than what anybody else offers. And in terms of that flexibility, it matters.
My guests today are Tracy Therrett, Chief Human Capital Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Carmen Garcia, Chief Human Capital Officer at the Office of Personnel Management. I'm your moderator, Drew Friedman, and we're discussing Fed Future, the Workforce Evolution, sponsored by WEPA on Federal News Network. Welcome back to our discussion on Fed Future, the Workforce Evolution, sponsored by WEPA on Federal News Network. My guests today are Carmen Garcia, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Office of Personnel Management, and Tracy Therrett, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm your moderator, Drew Friedman. And, before the break, we were talking about this goal of early career recruitment and how that ties in with hybrid work. Tracy, we heard from you on what's going on with the VA in that regard, but Carmen, I wanted to turn it over to you as well. How are you working through this, challenge of early career recruitment? That's something that is very common for agencies. Have you had any developments recently in that area of your workforce?
Absolutely. We've had this renewed focus on early career talent at OPM, and we launched some initiatives over the past year when it came to early career talent, specifically around our internship program. OPM is not unlike other agencies that sometimes have resource constraints. So first, there was a lot of interest from a lot of our offices within OPM, but sometimes there wasn't that resourcing aspect of it. So what we wanted to do is put out that data call to see where was that interest, where was the need. And then as an agency, we have a strategic hiring committee where we're looking at prioritizing hiring against being able to deliver on mission for OPM. And what this strategic hiring committee was able to do is say, this is a priority for our agency. This is a priority for developing this talent pipeline, and therefore find the resourcing so that we could support all of the needs that were coming in from the data call that we put out for the agency. So that was the first step, is making sure that we were securing those resources. And then for the first time ever, we had a summer cohort of interns at OPM, which was wonderful. We actually wanted to have ultimate flexibility when we posted the announcement, and to have the options for folks to be remote and for folks to be in person. And it was curious where we ended up, it was precisely half were remote, and that's just how it ended up. Half were remote, half were in person. So then some of the challenges that we had is, how do we make the onboarding experience meaningful? How do we make sure we have events throughout the summer that are developmental, but that are equal in experience for these interns? And we had 27 intern experiences that we either hosted or coordinated for. Some examples of these events were brown bag lunches. They were able to meet with all kinds of agency leadership. OPM hosted the astronaut crew launch event, right? Where not just OPM interns, but interns across the federal government were able to attend and interact with astronauts. We also had White House tours. So we were making sure that when we had these events, we were as inclusive and engaging as possible with our in-person folks, but also for the folks that were virtual. And actually, what this allowed us to do is some of the interns, it was such a great symbiotic relationship that we had, in that when this came to an end, some of our offices wanted to continue the relationship. For the in-person folks, they had to go back to school that was not necessarily in DC. But the fact that we have flexibility now, we were able to convert them so that they could continue to work for us on a part-time basis virtually. So it's really opened up a lot of possibilities where the flexibilities have been able to enhance the development and interaction with our interns and developing that early career pipeline.
And, Carmen, just to follow up there a little bit, this importance of, flexibility and kind of drawing between the two, both, virtual and in person. Is that something that you see being very similar, or is there any difference between how that plays out for interns or early career employees at OPM versus those who have been around for a long time, or maybe more established teams within the agency?
Yeah, I think, we are able to have a lot of lessons learned throughout this process and see what has worked, what has not, and what has worked, being able to make sure we iterate on that, and we're able to allow for those flexibilities to continue. There have been some things that maybe we need to tweak and hone in on and shift, but the things that have worked, we've been able to do so. For example, OPM is a geographically dispersed workforce. And many times we heard from these folks that were not at headquarters or in the National Capital Region that they didn't feel as engaged. They didn't feel as part of the OPM community. And now with these flexibilities, right, the fact that we are hiring folks remotely at a greater pace that we did before allows because we are able to lean in on these flexibilities, the technology, they feel that they're more engaged, that they're more included in many things that we're doing. So like I said, leaning in on the things that have been working and those flexibilities, and making sure that we iterate on the things that, you know, need improvement on.
And Tracy, turning it back to you a little bit here as well. Do you have any specific examples or anything you can offer about, you know, some of that piece of it too, this, you know, idea of how do you make sure that employees are engaged, or maybe where do you take examples where things didn't work so well and kind of reflect or change based on that?
No, I think those are great questions. And I go to something Carmen mentioned. At VA, we also have an employee engagement framework that we use, which focuses on servant leadership. It focuses on innovation. It focuses on employee voice, connection to the mission, and opportunities to develop and focus on wellness. So I think wherever you are doing your job, whether you're reporting to an agency work site or you're doing it from your alternate work site, making sure those tenets of employee engagement are present in the lives of our employees, in the lives of our supervisors. But three things that I will mention that I have observed being more in tune and intentional with this hybrid setting that we're kind of getting very comfortable with and just continuing to assess and evolve and experiment with is nobody that I have talked to misses the commute. So just knowing that that is a plus for people's, you know, mental health and physical health in some respects, not to have to do that commute, which for some is very arduous. Also some cost savings. You know, coming into the office and what it may cost for lunch, or I've heard what it may cost for dry cleaning, you know, the different things that when you're coming into an office to do your job versus when you're a little bit more comfortable, relaxed, and at home, and able to tap into some things that you can't at the agency work site. But on the flip side, looking at employee burnout, I really do worry that people are able to turn off when their home environment is also their work environment, and being able to give employees some tips about you don't have to be on all the time. You need to be able to separate your work life from your personal life. I don't need you to be working more hours or later or on the weekend if that's not what's expected from people who report to the work site. So just really being sure that you're keeping an eye on the physical and mental health of your employees who are both in person and remote. And then I think what Carmen tapped into earlier is our employees are really excited about the opportunities to be promoted into the higher levels within the organization. I mean, back in the day, and I'd say maybe 10, 15 years ago, it used to be if you work in the field, the highest you can get is X. You have to come to headquarters and be able to spend a part of your career in Washington, D.C. to get grades Y and Z. I don't think that's the narrative anymore. I think we're able to create equity across opportunity, across grade levels, across advancement, career advancement, regardless of if you work in Phoenix, Arizona, or if you work in Washington, D.C. So I think those are some of the things that we have seen that have helped us with both engagement, recruitment, and retention, and as managers and supervisors, things that we just want to be mindful of.
Tracy, I think a lot of what you said is very, very resonant, especially about that idea of, you know, maintaining work-life balance and the worries of burnout. That's something I think is not unique to the VA. A lot of employees do see that sort of trend. So one kind of follow-up there is, you know, are there flexibilities for the VA with, you know, when you do your work? And so I know that some agencies at least have this policy or program where they can do like maxi flex or change their hours outside of a normal 9-to-5 job. Is that a flexibility that is offered to employees, or something that, you know, people are really looking for moving forward?
Yeah, I think in addition to alternate work arrangements, which is your telework, virtual, on-site, The flexible work schedules are also incredibly of great interest to new hires and existing employees. And I will say VA is fortunate. We've partnered a lot with OPM in developing our policies and our guidance around flexible work schedules. But I don't think there's one out there that OPM hasn't offered across the federal government that we aren't leveraging, both in for our Title V workforce and our Title 38 healthcare workforce. And I also have to put a plug in for our labor partners, because a lot of these flexible work arrangements are negotiated and bargained and part of our collective bargaining agreements. So our bargaining unit employees, our non-bargaining unit employees can take advantage of these flexibilities when they need it because of, elder care or child care. I mean, we have so many dependent care situations with people being caregivers these days. It's not just that you're caring for your children anymore. You may be caring for your parents and trying to figure out how to balance a career and not have to make those sacrifices because of your family circumstances. So we have 549 schedules, we have 410 schedules, we have maxi flex schedules. I will tell you, technology can be a blessing and technology can be a curse. We have wonderful technology that helps us collaborate and helps us share documents and helps us feel more connected, like Carmen was mentioned. And then we also have some limitations with things like our time and attendance system and our personnel system and our payroll system. So while we may want to do something really creative and innovative like Google, we may not be there yet from a technology standpoint and some of the tools that we have to use it. So we're trying to make sure that even if we have to manually track information, which is not ideal, that we are not using that kind of workaround that we need to put in place from keeping us from offering those things to employees that they really want and they really need.
And Carmen, I want to bring you in on this similar question here. Is that something that you hear from OPM employees, this, desire for more flexibility, not just in where you work, but when you work, and, trying to manage or maintain work-life balance with that?
Absolutely. I think, striking the right balance is what I'm hearing as a theme, right? As we're discussing a lot of these topics. At the forefront, we always want to maximize performance and productivity. But at the same time, we want to look out for our employees. Like Tracy mentioned, burnout, we're starting to see some signs of that. And we want to make sure that we are supporting our employees. And how can we lean into all those flexibilities? Of course, being OPM, we have all the flexibilities that Tracy mentioned, but we also recently announced that we wanted to make sure that we are engaging meaningfully in person. And in order to facilitate that, we announced that our teleworking employees had to report to their work sites across the board twice a week. Moving forward, right? And that's going to begin in a phased approach starting on the 25th of this month. But in addition to that, what we're asking all of the different organizations within OPM is to look at their alternative work schedule policies. And some of them were outdated and were not reflecting our current work environment. And we needed to make sure we leaned in and updated those to make sure they're in alignment to making sure that we are productive and we are hitting, our performance goals. But giving flexibilities where there are those opportunities. So an example of this would be non-contiguous work schedules. There are some places within our agency where could there be a scenario somebody starts working, from home early, lets traffic pass, and then they're able to come into the office and have the meetings that they need to have and be able to be home in time to, pick up their kids from the bus or for whatever other purposes that you have. So making sure that one, yes, we are meeting mission, that we are prioritizing performance and productivity. But where can we build in those flexibilities so folks are not stuck in traffic for 2 hours and detracting from that, but they are able to be present in the best way possible. So that's how we're leaning in and making sure, and to Tracy's point, also collaborating with our union partners, because all of those alternative work schedule policies have to be bargained and negotiated. And they've helped us really shape a lot of the things that we're doing moving forward when it comes to our work environment.
Thanks, Carmen. And, just following up there as well, is that something, we talked a little bit earlier about this idea of data and feedback. Is that something that you often hear from employees, or where are you getting that information when you're trying to move forward with those more flexible options for employees?
What we've really encouraged our leadership is in their town halls to have these open and candid conversations. I myself, with my team, in my human resources team, we recently had an in-person town hall where I flew everybody from across the country, and of course the folks that are here in DC, and we had really meaningful collaboration over a span of 3 days, and we dedicated some time to talk about things that are working, that are not working, some of the flexibilities, and hearing some of their concerns right directly, so that that can help shape what I would like to do moving forward within my organization. And we've been very, very open as far as my colleagues are concerned. And when we hear certain things that resonate from our employees, to share it across the board, so that that helps shape, of course, our individual strategies, but overall the strategy that's going to be for our agency moving forward. So really having those open lines of communication. Of course, we have formal mechanisms that we already talked about, surveys and such, but really making sure that our supervisors, our managers are having those conversations with employees is so crucial.
My guests today are Carmen Garcia, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Office of Personnel Management, and Tracy Therrett, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm your moderator, Drew Friedman, and we're discussing Fed Future, the Workforce Evolution, sponsored by WEPA on Federal News Network. Welcome back to our discussion on Fed Future, the Workforce Evolution, sponsored by WEPA on Federal News Network. My guests today are Carmen Garcia, the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Office of Personnel Management, and Tracy Therrett, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And thank you both so much for being here. I kind of want to pivot a little bit. We've talked a lot about, the idea of flexibility, engagement with the workforce, with your current workforce, and that whole area. But I want to talk a little bit more about, I guess, long-term recruitment strategies or workforce strategies at each of your agencies. So Carmen, maybe we can start with you. What are some skills or talent gaps that you see right now within OPM's workforce, and how are you working towards addressing some of those challenges?
Yeah, one area of focus for our agency is really leaning in on bringing talent to support our IT modernization efforts. For OPM, that's really been the focus. If you look at our retirement services division, making sure that we can modernize that, we can hopefully at one point automate, the retirement application and so forth. So technology has played a really key role in enabling government services to continue throughout the pandemic, and building on those investments really continues to be key for us. And many of our goals and initiatives are only possible with the help of talented tech workers in federal service, which is why OPM and also other agencies across government are targeting individuals in the tech industry and recruiting them into public service. And because we recognize that tech talent is a critical area the federal government is focused on hiring, in January, OPM held a virtual job fair called Tech to Gov, and it connected nearly 2,000 tech professionals across the country with 41 federal agencies to explore career options available to them. And 2/3 of participants said they were more interested in federal careers as a result of being connected to these agencies. That event was so successful that OPM held the Southern Regional Tech to Gov event in July with equally promising results. And we're planning to do another nationwide event in October. And we launched a Tech to Gov interagency working group to make sure we're keeping up with this momentum. And in following the job fairs, several agencies made offers and hired these candidates. And among them, OPM, IRS, GSA, and VA were some of the agencies that were able to make these hires. And OPM, like we mentioned earlier, right, we are continuing to focus on federal opportunities for early career talent. And this is not just interns, right? We're also focusing on recent graduates and early career professionals as well. And then lastly, OPM has been making investments to support our retirement services team and ensure that they are able to provide assistance to federal retirees as they make a transition into their well-earned retirement. So that's just a little bit of a taste of the initiatives and the efforts that we have around talent.
Thanks, Carmen. And I did want to follow up with the Tech to Gov events that you all have been hosting. What is the sort of messaging that you give to cyber or tech employees and to kind of convince them or encourage them to consider a job in the federal sector?
Well, of course, the public service motivation is something that we always lean into. The work, the impact that you have by doing the work that you're doing, specifically at OPM, the fact that you are working to enable, folks when they've given their entire careers and now they're getting into retirement, if they're able to make that process easier for folks, they're part of making that happen, right? And there's so many things that we can dive into that our tech professionals, by coming to the federal government, they're able to help the American public in so many ways. Also, the stability that we have in the federal government, we just talked about all these flexibilities that we have as well. So all of this applies to that tech workforce. And I think that resonates with a lot of folks and why we're seeing interest, especially in light of a lot of these folks coming off of major layoffs, right, that we're seeing in the private sector. So I think that has been some of the appeal in the draw.
And Tracy, I want to bring you in on this conversation as well here. So kind of circling back to the first part of the question that I asked Carmen, what are some of the talent needs or skills gaps that the VA is focusing on? And are there ways, like kind of maybe some of the things that Carmen was mentioning, that you're trying to fill those gaps, or what are some of your strategies for filling those gaps?
So Drew, I'm going to start by answering the question in 3 parts and come off of what Carmen had mentioned about the tech talent, because we have been partnering on the Tech to Gov working group with OPM and using it to leverage the next generation of IT talent that we need at the VA. So through the Sergeant Heath Robinson Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxic Exposures Act, we have been able to offer special salary rates to IT professionals, which has really helped us to draw talent from private industry into the federal government, because still federal pay system when it comes to IT professionals is lagging behind that of private industry. So that is one way to kind of at least be on an even playing field with the private industry when it comes to attracting tech talent. The other thing that we've done is we've really focused on training in cybersecurity skills. We have a cyber academy. We're participating with OPM in some cyber rotation opportunities across government. So really trying to add skills in that particular space to the federal workforce and to be able to create opportunity across federal agencies. So a lot that we're doing in the tech talent space and trying to increase our skills. And to Carmen's point, I mean, someone coming and being part of our mission, working in a hospital to deliver care through the latest technology and the latest systems, being able to modernize our benefits processes, being able to reach millions of veterans, their caregivers, and their survivors, and giving them the most state-of-the-art technology to do things easy and to do things quickly. So I think there's a lot of attraction, a lot of high value proposition in what we do and being part of it from the technology space. The other area that we focus on in terms of skills and talent are our mission critical occupations. Believe it or not, it's the cemetery caretaker in the National Cemetery Administration that we want to make sure has the skills that are needed today to perform that job. Our claims examiners in VBA, our physicians, nurses, psychologists, social workers in VHA, our Veterans Health Administration. So just really making sure that we're out there attracting the occupations that we need to fill our staffing requirements and with the talent that they need. The third thing that I will mention is just really looking not just at tech, not just at mission critical occupations, but at the healthcare industry and specifically the mental health professionals in particular. In that space, whether you're in the private sector or the federal government, the supply is low and the demand is high. So you really have to look at everything that you can do to attract those skills into the federal government. And we have incentives such as critical skills incentives. We have some special pay authorities that we've gotten from Congress. But I think ultimately it's making the environment one that people want to come to, whether it's because we're offering scholarships, tuition reimbursement, just kind of setting ourselves apart from others. I was talking to somebody yesterday at an event that I attended, and he said, we have a lot of academic affiliates and we have doctors who train through the VA before as they complete their residency and their training. And he had one doctor who was providing his care at the VA, and then all of a sudden that doctor wasn't there doing his residency anymore. And then he went out into the community and was getting his care, and the doctor was with that private hospital. And he said, what happened? Why didn't you stay at the VA? And he said, well, this employer would pay my student loans. So we really have to look at, to get that talent, to get those cardiac thoracic surgeons, to get those anesthesiologists into the federal government. What is it that we need to be doing, and being able to stay competitive in that space?
Yeah. And, I think one other interesting thing or important thing to point out here is that this idea of skills gaps, it is obviously very central to the recruitment aspect and bringing new employees in the door for agencies, but also the way that the government defines skills gaps is about your current workforce and trying to build skills within the employees that you already have. So Tracy, maybe if I can bring it back to you, what sort of, training programs do you have for employees, or are there ways that you're trying to, fill some of these skills gaps or these talent needs with the employees that you already have on board?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I can offer is that we really are looking at career paths that reflect the skills of the future, and being able to have employees get into programs, either leadership development programs or programs within their sector, like financial management or contracting, where they're developing the skills that they need to do the work in 5, 10, 15 years. The other areas with HR. So you look at the competencies, and I know we've been partnering with OPM on this. What are the competencies that an HR professional needs today versus what they may have needed 10 years ago when they started doing classification or they started doing recruitment and staffing? Totally different set of tools and technology that they have available today. So what are we doing to both to identify those competencies, put programs in place like maybe certification programs where they get that training and become competent to the level of experience that we need. I know at the VA, I co-chair our people subcouncil of our data governance council. And we're really looking at what is the data workforce of tomorrow. The data workforce is not just defined as the occupational series who do data analysis. It is being an HR person who understands data and can do some data visualization. I know OPM has created some wonderful dashboards around time to hire, around attrition, around DEIA. It is hard to do HR work today if you don't understand that data, if you don't know how to visualize that data, and if you don't understand how to explain that data to hiring managers, to applicants for employment, to employees within your organization. So making sure that in all of our curriculum, both for new hires and as folks progress into the higher grade levels, that they're getting training in those skills that we know that they will need in the future. And I don't even know where to start with generative AI, because that is becoming part of our vocabulary as well, and helping people to understand how when you have to write that job announcement, it may not be taking a template and working in Word. It may be a chat with a few queries and a few keywords, and all of a sudden it's produced. And you just need to make sure that it is doing and meeting your needs and expectations.
And Carmen, does that resonate with you at all, this idea of, where this training is needed or where you can kind of develop skills within OPM's workforce too?
Absolutely. I mean, Tracy said it best, right? And she hit a lot of the points that we are personally working on here at OPM. We're looking at having, we recently hired a new chief learning officer, and one of her objectives is to really look at a plan to address our skill gaps. And that's first doing, a whole of agency assessment to see, look at the competencies within the different areas of the agency. And then once we're able to hone in on that, then developing a plan of how we are going to lean into training and to development. But I want to just touch on a couple of points that Tracy made when we're talking about data, right? She mentioned that we are leaning into dashboarding, and OPM is putting out wonderful resources for the federal government. Internally, we are also leaning into things like Power BI and all these tools. And our folks, some feel overwhelmed in terms of how do we create this wonderful dashboard? How do we translate Excel spreadsheets into this? So yes, it's making sure we are upskilling our workforce to make sure that we are keeping pace with the way that technology is advancing, data literacy is very, very important because we want to be able to leverage the data. But if we simply give the data to, say, our hiring managers from an HR perspective, and we're not equipping them on how to use that data and having that data literacy, it could actually be detrimental in some aspects, right? So we have to be very careful about how we are strategic. But generally, with HR moving from being reactive to being strategic, many different parts of OPM are moving from being transactional to being strategic. And how are we going to help with those folks? It is through career pathing. It is to making sure that we are developing these internal training programs to address that as well. Personally, within HR, we are leaning into AI very much here at OPM. We are looking at, for example, position descriptions, and already made a lot of headway with that, and looking at our classification standards and uploading that and seeing how we can put in, major duties into, our AI sandbox, and seeing what kind of position descriptions can be developed out of that. Looking at job analysis and looking at seeing how they can be leveraged to then do a job announcement. So AI is really an interesting field that we are exploring, and we're actually seeing a lot of results from. So really looking forward how we can leverage that in the future as well.
And I kind of want to pose a question to both of you a little bit more broadly. You have both alluded to it, this idea of partnership between OPM and the VA, for example, on some of these challenges, whether it's with hybrid work, whether it's with hiring, whether it's with training. So what do you see as the broader importance, I guess, of this idea of partnership among chief human capital officers? How often are you all in touch with each other, and how does that kind of push forward some of the work that you're trying to get accomplished here?
Well, Tracy, I think I would be remiss if I don't mention that last week we were at the Chico Council Fall Forum at the Federal Executive Institute, which is an organization within OPM, and it was put on by the Chico Council. And for me, it was such an invaluable opportunity to meet some of the Chicos that I had not met before, but have that fellowship. And when we were having lunch and dinner, asking them what they were doing within their agencies, learning so much. And I came back and I downloaded with my team, and just the richness of information that I was able to get. Hearing that, I have a smaller agency in comparison to Tracy's department, of Veteran Affairs, but that even in that disparity, we have so many commonalities as far as the issues that we're facing, right? So in ideating and finding solutions for that, being able to come together and collaborate and innovate was very, very essential. Also, that partnership with OPM and OMB, they were present there as well. And some of the challenges that we are currently facing and know we will continue to face, hearing directly from the Chicos. So as they are setting forth guidance and policy, to be able to hear from all of us and making sure that they're hearing some of those challenges directly that we're having in those agencies, I think was a really critical conversation as well. So I think hopefully we can continue the momentum that was established there. There's so many working groups that have been established also in the Chico Council. I know that Tracy probably can speak to a lot of this as she's part of some of these executive steering committees and so forth. And I'm looking forward, I joined a couple of those working groups as well, about all the work that the Chicos, by coming together and having our collective resources and thought power, we can hopefully be able to get some wonderful solutions moving forward.
Thanks, Carmen. And Tracy, just wrapping up here, any final thoughts on this importance of partnership among Chicos when you're trying to accomplish some of these goals that you've set out for the federal workforce?
So, Drew, collaboration is critical. No one agency or no one person can do everything that needs to be done to support the federal workforce. And at the end of the day, that is what we are. Human is in our title for a reason. We cannot lose the human in human resources or human capital. And I will share maybe 3 or 4 things. One is Director Hujat is amazing. The OPM leadership has helped all of our cabinet level agencies, wonderful partnerships and relationships with the secretaries at every federal agency. So I think it starts at the top, as they say, and then it cascades down. So I think as long as we all know our roles and responsibilities, which I think we have become increasingly clear about over time because we've worked so closely. I know one of our former Chicos used to always say, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think the pandemic was definitely a crisis. And it brought us together in many ways that we never thought we could. I often reflect back that OPM and the federal government established a federal holiday in 48 hours. How many times in our life do we act that quickly, that agilely, that effectively? But that was the Juneteenth holiday. Congress enacted it, and all of a sudden we came together and we made it happen. So just knowing what is possible when we work together. Last things that I'll mention is just it's critical that we continue to be effective and efficient as a Chico community. That happens at the congressional level. I love working with OPM on legislative proposals. I love pulling my federal colleagues in who are peers on similar issues, whether it's DOD and HHS and VA and OPM coming together on Title 38, hiring authority issues, or whether it's some of the work that was done on the infrastructure law or the CHIPS Act. So really just making sure that we are working together at that legislative level, because we all have different committees that we have to work with to get the things that we need. The other thing is working very closely with OPM during their policy office hours. I mean, we get executive orders. We've probably had more executive orders in the last 2-3 years than I can count. We get changes to the regulations. We have a lot of new regulations coming out in the Federal Register. If we are communicating and collaborating on these pieces of human capital policy, when they go live, when we get that guidance, when we get that transmittal from OPM, we are better prepared to train on it, to implement it, to make sure our systems are ready for it. So just really strengthening that connective tissue in that space. And then finally, just making sure, whether it's the staffing specialist at VA or the benefits specialist at Homeland Security, that at the staff level, everybody is engaged and working to both innovate and share those best practices. Because I will speak for one of my colleagues who says, when there is a policy that comes out, like the Fair Chance to Compete Act, where we all have to put in place similar things around violations of people's information, we have to do it 38 different ways, really? Why can't we look at one way that everybody can benefit, leverage, and or share from? So I think, that's my long-winded response to looking at when OPM and the federal government work together at all of those different levels, what we can accomplish, and just really exciting times ahead.
Tracy Theriot, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Carmen Garcia, Chief Human Capital Officer for the Office of Personnel Management. Thank you both so much for joining me today. This was a really great conversation. I'm your moderator, Drew Friedman, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search WAPA.
Thanks, Drew, Carmen, and Tracy for an excellent discussion. Drew's now going to discuss similar issues with Erin Moore, the Chief Human Capital Officer of the Energy Department, who will share her insight. Take it away, Drew.
Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. My guest today is Erin Moore. She is the Chief Human Capital Officer at the Energy Department. Erin, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Drew. I appreciate it.
Of course. And today I want to talk about the hybrid workplace and the future of work for federal employees. We know there's a lot of changes that have happened recently, especially this year, when it comes to the hybrid workplace and the future of work. Some of this is a broader vision from the Office of Personnel Management, and a lot of it is also agency specific. So I wanted to hear from you a little bit about what's going on at the Energy Department right now in terms of hybrid work changes for agency employees and what that's going to mean for your workforce going forward.
Mm-hmm. So yes, this is definitely a topic that is on top of everyone's mind. So Energy has been out of its maximum telework posture from COVID since March of 2022. And since then, our employees on a whole are scheduled to be on site 50% of the time. And so, as you alluded to, OMB released guidance this past April for agencies to assess their organizational health and performance. with the intent for agencies to increase on-site presence. And so in response to this, the department took several steps to gather manager and employee feedback. So we did data calls, surveys, targeted interviews, and we used the information that we gathered to help inform a vision for the department so that we can balance individual and team performance. And so the department is continuing to increase meaningful in-person work in an intentional and deliberate way. There are many benefits to increasing on-site presence, from creative collaboration and problem solving, face-to-face conversations and meetings, and also integrating new staff into our teams. The point is not that we need to be on site all the time, but we need to be deliberate about how often we are and how we spend that time. And as someone said to me, it's really like presence with a purpose. And so in general, we are going to continue to reflect on and refine how best to deliver our mission in a hybrid model, both now and in the future. We've asked our managers to thoughtfully reflect on how their teams are working with each other, not only internally within their organizations, but also with other DOE offices and as they engage with the public. I mean, the department, honestly, we are always working to improve on our processes and our work environment.
Right. And as there is this transition, it sounds like this is something that, as you said, has been happening at Energy for quite a while. It's not necessarily new, this, return to office that we're seeing from a lot of agencies right now. And I guess over the past year or so, what are some of the challenges that have arisen in this hybrid work world? And how do you manage things like employee engagement and satisfaction when you have this kind of challenging mix between the two?
Yeah. So I think an important piece to understand is that the Department of Energy has always been geographically diverse organization, given our nature of work and the nationwide spread of our field facilities and the national labs. I mean, honestly, we've been operating in a hybrid environment for decades. And so I mentioned earlier that we administered a survey to get feedback on DOE's work environment for on-site, teleworking, and remote employees. And the feedback we received was really positive. It showed our employees are satisfied with the work flexibilities being offered, with productivity across the board, which is the most important from a mission perspective, and with how they're treated, whether they're on-site, telework, or are remote. But we always have to keep working to ensure all of our employees, regardless of where they work, have the tools and the resources they need to be successful and to stay engaged. So for our teleworking and remote employees, we provide a lot of training opportunities and resources to help maximize their effectiveness in the hybrid environment. We've encouraged the use of collaboration tools so employees working from home feel like they're part of the team and an office culture. For our employees who regularly report on site, we've made a lot of improvements to our headquarters facilities over the past year or so. We have new common use areas. These are collaboration centers. So there's conversational seating, there's device charging station, TV feeds, and flexibility for hybrid meetings. And we are also we just transitioned to provide free gyms and locker rooms for all badged employees. We're doing new kitchenettes and more bottle filling stations. We are really just continuing to look for creative ways to improve our facilities and optimize them for hybrid work.
No, that's awesome. It sounds like you have all these little different pieces going on. And so how is that something you see as, maybe one of those changes on its own is a small thing that can help an employee or be a benefit to an employee, but all of that together, is that something you see as helping drive meaningful in-person work and in-person culture at Energy?
Absolutely. I think focusing on our employees and what they need and what they want is really a good way to increase on-site presence. As I mentioned, we have our leadership really thinking about engagement and how to ensure that we have a sustained culture of engagement and how that intersects with the hybrid environment and on-site working. It's really being deliberate about what we're doing and how we're doing it. You know, coming on site to sit on a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting isn't presence with a purpose. So it's really trying to work with managers to come up with what works best for them and for their employees, so that we are making the most out of people coming into the office to collaborate and work together to, you know, reach good solutions.
Right. And I want to go back to something you said just a few minutes ago. You were talking about, you know, some of the different reasons that or ways that you can make in-person work meaningful. And one of those you mentioned was onboarding new employees. And so I kind of want to use that as a segue to pivot to recruitment at Energy right now. What do you see as some of the talent needs that your agency has, and how are you working towards addressing those, whether it's through maybe bringing on new people versus upskilling the ones that you have?
Yeah. So bringing in new employees is definitely a big one right now for the department. Of course, with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, the department has been growing to meet its historic new responsibilities related to climate change and clean energy. As part of that, we've established 5 new program offices. We launched the Clean Energy Corps, which is a hiring campaign to hire hundreds of employees to help fulfill this mission. We've been working to streamline application processes to ensure we can hire quickly the best and the brightest from, you know, diverse applicant pools across the nation. Really, this is the largest expansion at DOE since the establishment in 1977. And so we are really excited to be part of this historic moment. At the same time, as you mentioned, though, upskilling our workforce has always been and will always be a huge priority for us. We offer a huge, like a full suite of services to support our employees with their career development goals. We have a robust learning management system that includes courses to strengthen job-related skills, as well as assessments to test what employees are learning. And we recently launched a new tool called Precipio that uses machine learning to support upskilling or reskilling. And it actually recommends lessons based on an employee's role and incorporating their previous learning activities. We make sure that our employees also have access to mentoring programs and rotations to broaden their professional experience. I send out a weekly email to all federal employees at Energy with new career opportunities. So everybody is aware of what's going on and what opportunities exist in the department.
And I'm curious, you know, you mentioned that for the hybrid work, when we were talking a little bit more about that you used a survey and you took feedback from employees on that aspect of the workforce. Have you gotten feedback or heard anything from either the recruitment aspect of Energy or the upskilling training in that area of Energy? What have employees been, I guess, sharing about their experience with those?
Yeah, so the feedback has been really, really positive overall from all of our employees. As we are doing our recruitment, we have found that when we do advertise jobs remotely, the applicant pool is significantly larger. And so as we are, you know, moving forward, we just need to be cognizant of all of the things that go into making sure we are getting the best and the brightest people possible for the department.
And with the recruitment process as well, you talked a little bit about time to hire and trying to streamline that a bit. Have you seen any, I'm just curious, any results from, you know, how long it takes to bring in new employees? Has that number gone down at all recently?
Oh, absolutely, it has. I believe that we are, for the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Department of Energy has the fastest time to hire out of all of the agencies. As a department, the HC team has been really working very closely with our customers to bring on new employees. Our time to hire has significantly gone down. We are below 80 days, I believe. And so, again, we are always looking to improve our processes and streamline things so it's as easy as possible for our own HC employees to do their job, but also to support our customers so that they can achieve their mission.
So Erin, what are some of the specific numbers that you have for time to hire at Energy right now?
So we've been spending a lot of time collecting information on our time to hire and our throughput. As you know, OPM uses common time to hire metrics throughout the government with a goal of 80 days from a time to hire perspective. Looking back at how HC performed in 2019 pre-COVID, we hired about 1,100 employees, and our time to hire average was 139 days. And in just FY23, we hired more than 2,500 people. And our time to hire is, almost at 81 days. And so, we've really improved by 42%. And that's at the same time while increasing our throughput. And then just for DOE headquarters positions alone, our time to hire is at 70 days. And so we've been able to achieve this by working with our customers. They are committed to hiring the best and the brightest and really working with us. And we've HC internally been able to accomplish this while keeping our servicing ratio relatively flat at the same levels that we had in 2019. So we're always, as I mentioned, looking for ways to improve what we're doing, make it easier for our HC employees, and importantly for our customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I touched on this a little bit earlier. I believe you mentioned it as well, but the aspect of diversity in hiring is something that has been definitely a priority of this administration, and something that OPM has specifically said is important in hiring for the bipartisan infrastructure law. So how are you incorporating diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and those priorities into your recruitment practices as well as your retention practices?
Mm-hmm. So DEIA is woven into the fabric of our goals for future of work. That includes our vision to assemble a clean energy core that mirrors the diversity within America, and includes the communities who are impacted by climate change. And as I mentioned, we have found that a hybrid work model is an incredible recruitment and retention tool. It allows us to increase our access to diverse applicant pools with amazing talent. And in energy, we have really strong employee resources groups, which links our employees and our senior management together and leverages their diverse perspectives. And so these groups really support the personal growth and professional development of their members, and they also help develop programs and learning opportunities that benefit our entire workforce. And just a couple of weeks ago, October is Disability Month. And so a couple of weeks ago, we held our first Accessibility Summit, and we hosted a Disability Mentoring Day last week where we had hundreds of people attend who are interested in joining DOE. We also have a series of sessions scheduled throughout this month covering a wide range of topics, from physical accessibility, mental health in the workplace, and an overview of 508 compliance. Truly, we just continue to apply DEIA principles in our approaches to recruitment and hiring, to career progression and training and outreach, because we truly are the best when we draw from the contributions of all members of society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I'm just wrapping up here, Erin, whether it's with DEIA or these other, topics that we've touched on, hybrid work, meaningful in-person work, all this sort of stuff. It sounds like there's a lot going on at the Energy Department right now for its workforce. Where do you see your office or your goals going from here? What's next for Energy's workforce?
So we recently released our 5-year HC strategic human capital plan, and it has 4 aspects to it. One of them is of our top 4 priorities is related to work life and engagement, because we know that this is a key to employee productivity and retention, and have really made it a main area of focus for HC in the department. We are really fortunate to at DOE to get feedback from our workforce directly on this and many other topics. For FEVS, we average over 70% participation, and our leadership is committed and takes that feedback to heart. Some examples that we are either have recently done or are currently working on, we've expanded our access to online educational resources for our employees. We've added 76,000 new or revamped on-demand courses just in this past year alone. And this includes channels that are dedicated to employee well-being and thousands of learning assets to support employee health and wellness. We also launched a new executive development program, Let's Lead, which has been championed directly by our secretary, and it focuses our leaders on really practical behaviors that we believe will have a direct and positive impact on our DOE work culture. And we've also collected best practices for working in a hybrid environment from offices all across the department. This includes responsibilities and expectations from employee communication and engagement, support for employees and supervisors. We have leaders who are really pioneers in this space, and we have them actively sharing their experiences through lunch and learns and podcasts that we're sharing with our workforce. We've also launched a new EAP, Employee Assistance Program, with Federal Occupational Health. So we're now able to offer 24/7 telehealth services for our employees. And that also includes services which focus on employee well-being. Truly, we're always continuously assessing our work environment to gather manager feedback and employee feedback, and increasing our on-site presence while maintaining flexibility to support that work-life balance. I mean, it benefits the overall health of our department and the services we deliver to the American people.
Well, Erin, it sounds like you all are very hard at work over there. Thank you so much for joining me today to share a little bit of what's going on.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
I'd like to thank my guest today. Erin Moore is Chief Human Capital Officer at the Energy Department, and we were discussing the future of the federal workforce. I'm your moderator, Drew Friedman, and you're watching Federal News Network.
On behalf of Federal News Network and in partnership with WEPA, thank you for joining us. The archive session will be available shortly. If you qualify for continuing education credit, you'll receive an email with your training certificate. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.